All right, look, I got David Bollerado, and if you're watching the Metropolitan Window video screen, you see him. He is directly to my right. But how do you get to that Metropolitan Window video screen? You click on kdkradio.com and KDK Watch. Why is he here? The newsman extraordinaire, because we're going to talk about another newsman, an American broadcast journalist and war correspondent who gained prominence during World War II. With his live radio broadcasts from Europe for CBS, he joined CBS in 1935 and remained with the network for his entire career. His reports, especially during the Blitz, began with his signature opening, "This is London." Murrow's life has been dramatized in several films, including Good Night, Good Luck, which takes its name from his signature sign-off. And it is also now on Broadway, starring the incredibly talented George Clooney. And look, I don't put anything in the calendar that makes me want to relax. It's all work-driven. But I did do this because June 7th, just days away, don't anybody call me because I'm going to tune into CNN. They're going to actually broadcast this play from Broadway live. So tell me about Edward R. Murrow, who I've always respected. Go ahead, David.
Well, he would be considered the father of broadcast journalism. He certainly had a great understanding for a couple of things. One, the value of radio and the ability to paint pictures with words and to use the microphone dramatically. One of the things that he did that really caught a lot of people's ear was when there were people going into bomb shelters in London, putting the microphone down on the sidewalk so you could hear the footsteps as people rush to get to it. And the other thing that he certainly did when he hired his Murrow's boys, so to speak, that was the term for them. He was looking for people who were writers. Some of them may not have had good radio voices that we would associate with during the golden age of radio, at least, like H.V. Kaltenborn and so on. But he didn't care. He wanted people whose talent was their ability to write a news story in a good, effective way that informed people about what was happening, and it's factually correct.
Man, this guy, he can go from Superman to Edward R. Murrow. I need you back on the weekends. Talk to the boss, Mr. Comanchic. You know, Mr. Comanchic has taught me a lot. Obviously, one-time producer, now our boss. Talks about immediacy, getting it out there.
Right.
That's what Edward R. Murrow did all the time.
Especially with those broadcasts from Europe in 1938, especially with the Anschluss, and then in 1939 when the war began, because you could do that. So you would have that ability for the first time for people in the United States to hear war breaking out in Europe on their home radios.
Listen, another great newsman who's no longer here, Dave James, and so many of the great ones, Bill Steinbach. I work with them all, and some are still here, thank goodness, like Barbara Boylan, Bob Kometz. KDKA was the place for news, but the thing that Clooney had to do that kind of reminded me of Dave, and I'll tell you, we were just joking as I was looking in the monitor. I told Dave, I said, I'm losing all my hair. And he went, you're 68. And then my son said, you've had a good run, Dad. But what I was thinking about, Clooney comes on Stephen Colbert's show with a ball cap because he's been dyeing his hair black. Yeah. And it's growing out now because he's not going to be doing this thing much longer. Well, back in the day, we were all a little vain, especially in television. I would dye my hair, but for some reason, it was jet black. And Dave James used to, when I would get my hair dyed, Dave James, first thing he would say is, you got that shoe polish on your head again. But Dave was another one. And I put you in that category, and Paul in the morning and Paul in the afternoon. You guys are real newsmen, but this guy was a journalist. I mean, this guy was the real deal, and I think the godfather of all journalists. And I just hope people realize when he had that show in person and he would actually go into the homes of movie stars. Right, person to person, rather. Yeah. I mean, this guy was doing stuff that in a roundabout way we're still doing today.
Sure. And of course, a lot of his colleagues at the time looked down on him for doing that because that was more mass appeal as opposed to the stuff that he was doing on television on See It Now, which is the one that people associate most with Edward R. Murrow because that was the program where he had the McCarthy expose, where he allowed Joseph McCarthy's words to
basically
essentially bring him in. Yeah. Now there's, people will say that's one way of looking at it and sort of discounts the effect of something that will last much more in terms of history, which was when President Eisenhower essentially put an end to the McCarthy hearings by refusing to allow the Army to testify, citing executive privilege in the Army McCarthy hearings. And that pretty much did away with Joseph McCarthy, that and the Murrow broadcast, which was right around that same time as well.
So who really is responsible for that nightly news as we now know? Is it people more like Walter Cronkite or is it Edward R. Murrow?
Well, Edward R. Murrow did, especially in the post-war era, when he came back from London and he was in-house as an anchor at CBS News for a time, and the announcer on his newscast would every night say, "Listen to Murrow tomorrow." That was the slogan for it, and he was sponsored by the Campbell Soup Company at that point. Then See It Now, by the way, was sponsored by Alcoa, which was based here in Pittsburgh at the time.
Now, you don't even have any notes in front of you. Where's this stuff coming from? Get out of my studio. They're going to put you in my chair. I'm not going to be able to get to retirement, collect my retirement. What kind of kid were you? How do you know Alcoa? That's pretty cool.
That's how I spent my youth.
I mean, Alcoa sponsored Edward R. Murrow?
See It Now, yeah. And they did that because those were prestige programs. Now, if you were to call up a list of the Nielsen ratings from 1955, 1954, and so on, if you're looking for See It Now, you're going to be looking down because these were programs that were done for stature and so on. But
not ratings.
Correct.
But then it's funny how things go full circle because that great program that's still on today that I watch to this day, 60 Minutes, it became a ratings juggernaut.
Yeah, it became, after, in the mid-1970s, after they moved it to its regular time slot where it's been on forever, since I think 77, 78 or so on.
And you're the journalist, correct me if I'm wrong, but this word I hear all the time, wordsmith. Edward R. Murrow, man, I've watched the old kinescope in the films because this was long before video and listened to the audio. That guy could put stuff together.
Right. Well, I remember one of his phrases, "It's a bomber's moon tonight," describing London in World War II. Wow. And he, what was I thinking of? I know one of the things that he said that I remember listening to a documentary about his life in the mid-1980s. And in the age of social media, I think it really holds up. Someone asked him, it was Harry Reasoner who was doing an interview with him at the time. He says, "What about, all of the acclaim and so on you would get for being on the radio and on television?" And his answer was, "I think there's a certain danger that someone might think he is suddenly more knowledgeable or discerning when his voice is being amplified halfway around the world than it is when it's going from one end of the bar to the next." And I think in the age of TikTok and social media, that certainly is a very profound statement, even though he was saying that about 50 years before either one of them existed.
Well, I know you only watch reruns of Superman, but try this weekend to watch this on CNN so you can report back to me and give me your thoughts. But I can't wait. Good night. What is it again? Good night,
good night, and good luck.
Good night and good luck. That's the name of it. George Clooney, CNN Live on Saturday night. Can't wait. Thank you, David.
Sure.
Good stuff.
Thank
He
you.
didn't have one note in front of him. Pretty good stuff. All right, 6:45.